دكتور عبد الله.
نعم دكتور، السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
Can we start?
Inshallah. I'll start by introducing you first, and then we will move to you.
Carry on.
If you don't mind. Dear honorable guest, we are very delighted today to host one of the translation scholars in the Arab world, Dr. Abdullah Saleh Aziz from Al-Shaqra University. He holds a PhD in translation studies. He is both a translation teacher as well as translation scholar, in addition to being a researcher in translation and interpreting. He has published a number of papers that focus on point of view in translation, the cultural approaches to translation study, as well as the role or the impact of translation on the evolution of the Arabic novel. And the most attractive title on the paper is Translation as a Breastfeeder of Arabic Novel. So today we are very delighted to host Dr. Abdullah, and I think we will enjoy his presentation. So carry on, Dr. Abdullah, you can start your delivery.
Thank you so much, Professor Jassim. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وبعد. At the beginning, I would like to express to you how happy and honored I am to be among you at the Faculty of Arts, Bosrah University. I gladly thank Professor Majid Al-Ka'bi, Dean of the College, Professor Jassim Al-Miryani, and Dr. Mahmoud Tarabin. I also thank you for the opportunity to be among you to share and exchange ideas. And I hope that it will be a kind of mutual benefit for both of us. For me,
definitely, Doctor.
The session will roughly take an hour, through which I hope I'll be able to highlight one of the existence of one of the least talked topics in translation. After that, your comments, your questions are welcome. If you observe the title was Translation as a Vehicle of Stylistic Pollination. Pollination here is a kind of mild paraphrase to imply several concepts involved in the process, product, and effects of translation. Let me break it down to you a little bit more. Pollination is basically a term used in botany to refer to the process of transfer of pollens to a stigma, ovule, flower, or plant to allow fertilization. The term transfer here is of prime importance because it has a lot in common with translation itself, as I will explain later. Anyways, pollination is vital for plant continuation and sustainability. It takes place through various agents, including wind, animals, insects, and particularly bees. The same thing happens in languages and cultures. They get pollinated by one another, just like flowers. And translators here function like bees, transferring cultural, linguistic, and stylistic pollens across the various language communities. Here today, I will focus on this process of transfer with a special emphasis on literary discourse between Arabic and English, and I will bring to your notice material evidence to substantiate the argument. I'm aware that it is difficult to measure with certainty the exact time and sources of influences that take place across languages, but no one can deny that the main channel for these influences is translation and translated materials. Let me take a step back and provide some theoretical foundations for the issues I'm talking about. I'll start with Itama Ibn Zohar. He provided the polysystem theory, in which he sees literature as a system within a polysystem or another hypersystem. He uses the term polysystem. Translated literature is itself a subsystem of the literary polysystem in a specific language community or literary community. He maintains that translated literature can participate actively in shaping the center of the polysystem. And that's exactly what's happening here. That's to say, translated literature can move from being a marginalized genre to the position of affecting the existing literary tradition. Ibn Zohar proposes 3 scenarios. The first one is when a young literature, a young literature is being established or shaped. Number 2, when a literature is peripheral or weak. Number 3, when there is a critical turning point in literary history. For example, established models will become insufficient, and or when there is literary vacuum. I'll explain to you the 3 scenarios. The first scenario is when there is a young literature. For example, this applies to the Israeli scenario. When they started to build a nation, they needed to identify themselves with some kind of literature. So they started building up a kind of literary tradition, and in doing so, they had to borrow from different cultures and different literatures. This case, of course, does not apply to Arabic. When a literature is peripheral or weak. For example, there are in some communities, there are language minorities, such as in Spain, in some Arab worlds, in some Arab countries, there are people who speak different languages, and they have their vernacular literature, and this literature is weak. And in order to substantiate itself and to grow, it has to borrow from the existing milieu, literary milieu. This case does not apply to Arabic. The third one, when there's a kind of critical turning point, this is important because at some point of history, intelligentsia and literati, literary men and women, thought that in the Arab world, thought that they needed to experiment with new forms, to borrow from other traditions and try to subdue them to the Arabic literary traditions. Of course, if we look at these 3 scenarios, we'd find out that the first scenario does not apply to Arabic at all. Since Arabic literature has deep historical roots, it's not young at all. Nor does the second scenario, because in the Arab region, Arabic literature occupies the center. It's not in the periphery. So we may agree with the third scenario if we add to it certain elements such as colonization, globalization, and the dominance of cyberculture. If we want to consider the point of colonization and dominance, we may refer to some theorists, such as Basnet, Trivedi, Lefebvre, Bhabha, Spivak, Edward Said, but this is, we'd open new avenues which we cannot address tonight within the time limit we have. Anyway, let's limit ourselves to the stylistic pollination. In fact, the issues of stylistic pollination are too vast and too complex to cover within one session, or even 2. But we can here at least draw the attention to some of its aspects. We have implied that exchange between cultures and languages is an inevitable process as long as there is contact between them. This process of give and take varies in intensity depending on the dominance of one culture over another. I will now go directly to the point and put in your hands a sort of textual evidence. Let's first start with a simple excerpt from Arab's Nights, Alf Layla wa Layla, which is one of the, I can say that it is the most famous Arabic text in the Arabic literary tradition. I'll share it with you now. If you look here, we have the story of حكاية الصياد مع العفريت. Look at the first paragraph. قالت بلغني أيها الملك السعيد أنه كان رجل صياد وكان طاعنا في السن وله زوجة و3 أولاد وهو فقير الحال. Look at the formation of sentences. Look at how sentences are connected to each other without punctuation, as if it's a kind of river in which you have to dive from the beginning up till the end. There are no breaks. It's just flowing. Look at the end of this story, which is a kind of rhythmical refrain that happens at the end of each night. I'll just highlight it to you. It's page 17. Page 17. Yes, yeah, page 16. See. وأدرك شهرزاد الصباح فسكتت عن الكلام المباح. Those of you who are acquainted with Arab's nights, especially in the Arabic version, would know what I mean. This final expression is a kind of it's a kind of life-saving boat for the character here. It's a life-saving boat. وأدرك شهرزاد الصباح فسكتت عن الكلام المباح. It was the technique that she used to keep the king tantalized, waiting for the end of the story till the next night. Okay, now let's look at the translation. Okay. This is one of the most famous translations of and one of the earliest, by the way, by Burton, by Sir Richard Francis Burton. Okay, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that there was a fisherman well stricken. See the language. The language here is highly literary, while the language in the original is vernacular of the time. It's the language of everyday life. It's not the language of literary, but the understanding of the translator made him perceive that these are the traditions of the Arabic text, and so he tried to not only copy the meaning, he tried also to copy the tradition. He tried to pollinate the English, the English text. If you go down to the end of this night in particular, one second. See, I'll highlight it here. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. This is a kind of poetic thing. Okay, it's not English if you look at it. It's a kind of Arabized English. It's not English, it is Arabized English. So what the translator did is just he tried not only to copy the meaning, he tried to copy the tradition. He tried to as Lawrence Vinotti, Lawrence Vinotti tried to foreignize the text, foreignize the target text. Okay, I'll move on now to another point. I have chosen this text because based on the assumption that this is a purely Arabic text. That's Alf Layla wa Layla, Arab's Nights. Despite certain reservations regarding authorship and vernacular style of the period, however, all of us here would agree on certain points, such as we all easily understand it despite the fact that it was written more than 400 or 500 years ago. Number two, the rhythmical style of the narrative goes in harmony with Arab's inclination to rhetoric and musicality of speech, and stresses the fact that stories are meant to be orally transmitted. That's we Arabs have this kind of strong attachment to orality, to oral culture. It reflects this style reflects the tendency towards orality even in written discourse. The beat in prose evokes ecstatic attachment to the text, whether transmitted orally or through silent reading, but it is typically Arabic. Another point. Now, let me an excerpt from another text taken from the novel of Abdulwahab al-Isawi, The Spartan Registry, أو الديوان الأسبرطي، رواية حصلت على جائزة بوكر العربية في 2020. I will share with you an excerpt from Abdulwahab al-Isawi so that you can see the style. اللهم صل على سيدنا رسول الله. Where did it go? I have a technical problem right now, but anyway, I can read this out. I can read it out, and you would understand what I mean. Okay. In الديوان الإسبرطي في الديوان الإسبرطي مقتطفة بسيطة: اهتزت العربة عند المنعطف الأخير وحاولت أن أعتدل في مكاني، رفعت رأسي لأطل من النافذة، رأيت بعض البحارة يجوبون المكان، تتغير ملامحهم كلما حدقوا إلى امتداد الزرقة الداكنة للبحر. If you look at the style here, it's like a hammer. It's like a hammer. It's a kind of mechanical rather than rhetorical. It is the style of Arab's Nights. Let me just, okay, it's here. I will share it with you right now. Where is it? Yes. Share. Look at it. At the middle. اهتزت العربة عند المنعطف الأخير وحاولت أن أعتدل في مكاني، رفعت رأسي لأطل من النافذة، رأيت بعض البحارة. This is one point. The other point, look at some vocabulary here. أنت تعلم أنه ليس عار الوحيد وكل الأمم ما يسوءها وكل الأمم لها ما يسوءها من المثالب. The word itself, the word المثالب, is a kind of difficult word to understand. It needs a dictionary if you are not, well acquainted with Arab vocabulary. So this text, which is a 2020 text, is sometimes difficult to understand than a text that was written 400 or 500 years ago, which is it's a reflection of the need to imitate the English tradition, experimentation with vocabulary, experimentation with forms. Okay, this is a recent text. This novel won the Arabic 2020 Poker Prize. If you look at the sentences, they are different from Arab's Nights. The discourse lacks the orality-driven momentum of Arab's Nights. These sentences sound mechanical rather than rhythmical, and just like a hammer. If you it's a kind of reporting style. Now let's look to another text, a text that's translated from a short story of Alice Munro. Alice Munro is a Nobel laureate. She won the Nobel Prize in literature. Look at the translation of the text. I'll just magnify it here. Look, ظنت أن الطريقة التي كانت تستخدم بها دور الشوكة والسكين هي التي أسرت لب زوجها، كانت نفس طريقة استخدامه لهما. أمسكت دور الشوكة بيدها اليسرى واستخدمت الطعام استخدمت اليمنى فقط لقطع الطعام. Look, it's the same kind of rhythmical attitude. No, not rhythmical. I mean mechanical attitude, mechanical style. The style that's like beating of a hammer. Okay, that's if you look at the Al-Isawi's style, you would identify it more with Munro's translation than with Arab's Nights. Now I believe that you can see that the narrative style of Abdul Wahab Al-Isawi sounds more like the translated text than the Arabic text of Arab's Nights. I assure you here that these texts of Munro and Al-Isawi have been randomly chosen. It's just, I have read a lot of translated fiction, and I see that there is a kind of salient feature among them, which is the translators, most of them try to echo not only the meaning, but also the style, the touches that are inherent in the original text, in the source text. They try to reflect them in the target text, and in this way, they pollinated the style, they developed some kind of tradition. This tradition echoed itself not only in the translated literature, but also extended to cover or to touch the style of Arab writers who may have no idea of foreign languages. I'm not talking here about individual differences between translators, though subjective and individual traces of each translator can be found in the works that he or she translates. Many studies have provided that issue, have touched that issue and discussed it. You can refer to the paper that the book that Dr. Jassim referred to, how does it feel, the point of view in translation. This book has proved that individual translators have different ways of reflecting the same text. Okay, the impact of this phenomenon of stylistic pollination is not limited to fiction. It is, in fact, more evident in poetry. A huge number of modern Arab poets have been influenced by foreign influences, that their poetry has become elitist. I'll give you some evidence for that. It has become difficult to understand by common readers and requires professional expertise to decipher. Let me just give you an example here. If you take, for example, 1 second, I have a poem here by Adonis. I'll share it with you. Look at the poem here. قصيدة زهرة الكيمياء لأدونيس. ينبغي أن أسافر في جنة الرماد بين أشجارها الخفية، في الرماد الأساطير والماس والجزة الذهبية. ينبغي أن أسافر في الجوع في الورد نحو الحصاد. ينبغي أن أسافر أن أستريح تحت قوس الشفاة اليتيمة، في الشفاة اليتيمة في ظلها الجريح، زهرة الكيمياء القديمة. Well, we have read the poem, but I'm not sure whether you have come up with much meaning out of it. Just as I do, I didn't get much meaning. I'm just reading what seems to be poetry, but unintelligible poetry to me. Okay. However, if you compare it with another poem here by somebody who was not influenced by foreign influences, for example, I'll bring you to the Yemeni poet Abdul Baradduni. The title of his poem is مصطفى. فليقصفوا لست مقصف وليعنفوا أنت أعنف وليحشدوا أنت تدري أن المكلفين أخوف أغنى ولكن أشقى أوهى ولكن أجلف. يا مصطفى أي سر تحت القميص الملتف هلا أنت أراه لمحا لأن عودك أنحف. Look at the words here, look at the style. It's musical, it's rhythmical, it's something that you feel attached to, it's something that's easy to understand. It's something that you feel that every single part and trace of this poem touches you one way or another. But not Zahrat al-Kimya, because there is no Zahrat al-Kimya in our tradition. There is no chemical poem. There is no chemical flower in our tradition. That's why it's difficult for us to understand it. We have to start to bring out our expertise of our knowledge of the world and try to come up with a meaning of the title. Okay, and the more we go into the text, the more we get lost inside it. We come up with what I want to say is it is difficult to sometimes experimentation pushes writers to become so symbolic, so difficult to understand. Okay, here I strongly believe that as a translator and reader of Arabic poetry as well, we find this poem easier. That's the Al-Baraduni's poem. We find it easier to translate and identify with than that of Adonis. Okay, behind the deceptive simplicity of Mustafa poem, of this word, of the words of this poem, there is a strong kind of word management skill. However, generally, I don't mean here to say that foreign influence has brought bizarre outcomes in Arabic poetry. I'm just, implying that the stronger the foreign influence, the more difficult the outcome or product becomes. In other words, there are also poets who used foreign influence in very skillful and dexterous ways and managed to produce masterpieces. Let's look at the Rain Song, for example. Let's look at the Rain Song by Badr Shakir al-Sayyab. If you look at Badr Shakir al-Sayyab, I'll just show it to you. 1 second. Al-Sayyab. I'll just take a few lines from As-Sayyab's poem to highlight what I mean. Yes, it's here. Share. Look, تثاءب المساء والغيوم ما تزال تسح ما تسح من دموعها الثقال كأن أقواس السحاب تشرب الغيوم وقطرة فقطرة تذوب في المطر وتغرقان في ضباب من أسن شفيف كالبحر سرح اليدين فوق المساء دفء الشتاء وارتعاش الخريف ويهطل المطر مطر 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 لنين أي حزن يمطر. Please pay attention to these couple of lines. أتعلمين أي حزن يبعث المطر وكيف يشعر الوحيد فيه بالضياع كأن طفلا بات يهدي قبل أن ينام بأن أمه لا أفاق منذ عام فلم يجدها ثم حين لج قالوا له بعد غد تعود لابد فتستفيق من روحي نشوة البكاء ورعشة وحشية تعانق السماء كرعشة الطفل إذا خاف من القمر مطر مطر مطر. Okay, in Arabic tradition, we can say that As-Sayyab here managed to transform our conceptualization of rain. He changed it. He tried to add an external meaning, something which was not there in the Arabic tradition. Okay, as Arabs, we consider, and considering, you know, our hot and desert-like atmosphere, we tend to see rain as a symbol of growth, symbol of revival, and a symbol of life itself. As-Sayyab changed that and reflects a Western modernist attitude. To him, rain evokes depression. أتعلمين أي حزن يبعث المطر. How come rain creates depression for an Arab? This is something important, but it goes in line with the tone of the poem. Okay, he borrowed this kind of stylistic, or we can say here semiotic element. He added to the Arabic tradition, and now, if you ask any Arab poet or any Arab man of literature, what do you think of rain as a source of, you know, as a gloomy source of feelings, you know, something like that? They would immediately refer to Btariq As-Sayyab. He borrowed something, experimented with it, and added this foreign flavor, foreign pollination to the Arabic tradition, and it goes very well. Of course, I can say that free verse is a foreign import to the Arabic tradition, and it has benefited a lot from the rhythmical style of Arabic prose. We know the rhetoric, Arabic rhetoric tends to be musical, tend to create some kind of rhythm, and free verse does almost the same, except for the fact that in modernism, in Arabic modernism, they try to add this kind of experimentation and Western flavor, mythological element, etc., etc. We can say that the ability to assimilate the music of free verse of As-Sayyab's poetry is attributable to the intrinsic rhythmical quality of Arabic rhetoric and prose. Stylistic pollination in Arabic is not a one-way process. I have showed it to you. In fact, it is a kind of salient feature in the translation of literary and philosophical texts to impose their aspects of on target texts, given that in literary text form, in literary text in particular, form is also sometimes considered as a part of the meaning. So when we some translators, when they try to translate literary works, especially poetry, they try to not only translate the meaning of words, they also try to see whether the form contributes to the meaning, and reflect that on the target text. Because the form is also seen, is often seen to contribute to the text. Let's take a look. If you want to approve for that, you can just take a look at the end of Arab's Nights. I have highlighted that to you. I'll just show it to you again. وأدرك شهرزاد الصباح فسكتت عن الكلام المباح. When the translator translated that, he tried to reproduce the Arabic style. Just imagine if if so many Arab works were translated during that period. The features, some features of the Arabic tradition would have found their way into the English tradition. Who knows? Anyway, this is just an expectation. Anyway, And one more point. If you look at the translator himself, although he was a native speaker of English, Mr. Burton, or Sir Charles Burton, okay, he was not well acquainted with the theory of translation, because back then translation was regarded as a kind of language learning method, or at most was regarded as a branch of comparative literature. It was not a theory in itself in the 1800s something. Okay. I'll try to wrap things up as fast as I can. If you look at the style of Burton at the end of this expression of Shahrazad, okay, it's not a kind of English as we know English. It's a kind of, as I said, Arabized English. We may find an excuse for the translator for doing so by indicating that this theory was not as developed back then as it is now, or by claiming that translation was regarded as a language, language teaching method. Okay, we can also find the same in the direction. If we compare the English source text of Monroe's story to its Arabic text, if we compare, as I have shown to you earlier, that the style of Al-Isawi is somehow identical, or somehow close to the style of the translated text of Monroe, than to it was closer than to the style of Arab's Nights. This is because of the foreign import into the Arabic tradition. In conclusion, I'll try to conclude right now. In conclusion, stylistic pollination seems to be an inevitable outcome of translation, more clearly observed in the translation of literature, just as it can yield attractive products, such as a Sayyab's Rain Song. It can also cause dichotomies and schisms between the stylistic sensibilities of TT readers and the target text itself, as in Adonis and the poetry of Nazik al-Malaika and other Arab modernists and symbolists. They create poetry which is difficult to understand by common readers. Okay, in order to have a better understanding of this process of this stylistic pollination, we need to carry out a kind of two parallel lines of studies, diachronic and synchronic studies of some representative translated texts from various decades, so that we can trace the impact, when and how it came into the Arabic tradition, okay, at least in the last 120 years. Okay, only then can we account for the major elements and factors of stylistic pollination. Thank you for listening and for being patient with me. If you have any questions or any points, I'd be glad to share. I'd be glad also to learn from you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, for these insightful contributions about pollination between English and Arabic. And I think you have drawn our attention to, let's say, a very important aspect that we as translation teachers, or let's say critics, as well as students, because our students are also sometimes asked to comment on certain excerpts or translations. So now we have an idea about this phenomenon, which is called pollination. It's really attractive. The word that you have used to describe this phenomena is really very, very attractive. Let me start by, asking you the first question. Is this kind of stylistic pollination, is it voluntary, let's say, or imposed? When we translate, are we aware of imposing, let's say, consciously or unconsciously, this kind of, let's say, the phenomenon that makes the text feel as if it has written in the original, let's say?
I find this as a very interesting question, because the idea of the impact of the source text depends first on the expertise of the translator. The more expert the translator, the more distant he becomes from the influence of the stylistic features of the source text. However, sometimes these things happen consciously or unconsciously, while you want to be somehow, faithful, despite being a foreign, an old term, while trying to be faithful to the original text. You find sometimes that it is necessary not only to convey the meaning or the semantic level of the word, you also try to go up to the stylistic and not pragmatic and then stylistic level of the text itself. And in doing so, you try to, to reflect the source text into the target culture, into the target language as well.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. This kind of, let's say, mechanical style that you have talked about,
yes,
which is it related to the text, to the flexibility of the text, as you have hinted here, to the professionalism of the translator?
Yes. If you look at this, the tendency of most writers and most grammarians in the last 50 years, you would find that most of them claim that Arabic language is a kind of VSO, as opposed to English that's SVO.
SVO, yes.
Yes, so they try to, they try to impose the verb at the beginning of the sentence. Most of the time, most translator and translation theorists try to say that it is better to start the sentence with a verb than a noun. Of course, starting the sentence with a verb would create some kind of action because you stress on the action. Now let's go back a little bit. Read Al-Fatiha. If we read Al-Fatiha, for example, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawm Ad-Din, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina. There is only Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, the only phrase that starts with a verb. Others start with other things, with prepositions, start with nouns, start with other things. Okay. Here they try to copy the English style, and this English style abounds in the language of news. Okay, it's suitable for the language of news and suitable also for the language of science as well. Okay, but in literature the case is different. You have to pay attention to certain shades of meaning, certain factors that you need to evoke or recreate. But after all, the literary sensibility differs from one culture to another, and what's fit for one culture may not do the same in the other culture.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. As an expert or let's say translator, is it easy to identify the levels in which stylistic pollination take place? Are there other levels, let's say, that we could identify? And are there any strategies that
yes
we can follow in order to identify such pollination?
Yes, I agree with you. This is a very interesting point. We as researchers, we only believe in material evidence, if you agree with me. We believe in quantum data, in quantitative data, something that we can touch, we can feel, something that we can build our conclusions on. And if we want to measure the impact of stylistic pollination, I believe that the best way that we can follow is by creating a kind of corpus for some works and selecting some kind of stylistic and grammatical elements. For example, we can take pronouns. We can see the repetition of pronouns, for example, in the Arabic text and in the English text. We can also look at punctuation, how it differs from two texts, the number of full stops, the number of commas. We can create a corpus, and according to the data, according to the results that come up with, we can build our conclusions.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Can this phenomena be investigated in other kinds of texts, Dr. Abdullah, other than literary ones?
Yes, yes, sure. It can be applied. And in fact, I believe that it can be observed in other texts more than in literary texts. Because, see, in literary texts, language is the sword of the writer. So you are playing with somebody in his own field, among his own, fans. He plays a literary person, he or she can play well with words and grammatical structures. But if you look at other kinds of texts, such as news or such as scientific register or other kinds of register and jargons, okay, you would find that it is easy to measure these elements, because they have certain kinds of formulas that they stick to. They try not to deviate or not to depend on stylistic differences as much as their interest in delivering the ideas themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. We are, you are generous in your answer. So this temptates us to also to ask other questions. Do you think that this kind of pollination could be viewed from the other side, the destructive or the negative side or the negative aspect?
Yes, I have to be discreet here, because I don't want to sound backward by saying that foreign imports are always bad. I'm not saying that, but sometimes people or some literary figures, they try to just reproduce or borrow too much, that they created some kind of dichotomy, some kind of gap between readership and text, Arab readership. Okay, if you look at the modernist texts, if you ask anybody, how many modernist poems do you memorize or do you read? I don't think that you'd find 1% of the Arabs read them. But if you ask them, do you listen to vernacular poetry? All of you would say yes. Because they identify themselves with this kind of poetry, not with that. They feel that they have to struggle to decipher the meaning of that text because of the foreign import. I'm not saying that this is bad. It's good to learn. It's good to borrow from others and to add it as a kind of flavor. But let's not, add it completely and indiscreetly to our tradition. We have to be careful when to add and how to add, so that they are. I hope the point. Yes,
what about this spatio-temporal, let's say, factors? If the translation dates back to 20 years, let's say, and another translation, which is nowadays, do these spatio-temporal, let's say, factors have an impact on, let's say, in the intensity of a stylistic pollination?
Yes, I do support this point completely, because I mentioned here that in order to measure this impact, we have to carry two parallel lines of studies, one synchronic and one diachronic. The synchronic study would give us the aggregate impact, would tell us what happened over the whole period of time. But we need also the diachronic study to select certain periods. For example, let's divide into decades. 10 decades, 10 decades. We would have to take at least, for example, for 120 years, we can take 12 texts, one text representative of each decade. And then we can collect the data and see what we come up with. It's a
Thank you, Dr. Abba. Thank you very much, Dr. Now, audience, these are some of the questions that I have.
Okay.
So if you have any question, dear audience, you can write them in the chat box, or you can raise your hands and ask Dr. Abdullah.
It would be my pleasure.
Greetings to you, Dr. Abdullah.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, Dr.
I am Dr. Spadade, colleague of Dr. Abdullah. Am I audible to you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. First of all, let me congratulate the organizers and also the resource person of this lecture, Dr. Abdullah, for his wonderful speech about translation.
Thank you.
Translation is a difficult arena. Why I say it's a difficult arena? It's so difficult to find the equivalent word in both the languages which you are comparing or translating. Just an observation. I would like to tell you now, normally the people translate from subject, object, and verb. Sometimes object, verb, subject, like that. For example, my language is Tamil. There is a, if I say, I am going to my house, I go to my house. In Tamil, we always used to say, "Nan vittal pogren." So, people, they translate, I home going. I home going.
Yes. If you do back translation, it would reflect that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like this, language, I can say language is a double-edged weapon. If you are not using it properly, totally the meaning would change.
Yes.
Even one more, a lot of jokes like this you have come across. One person, he was going to attend the funeral function. Somebody called him over phone. He is driving the car. He attended the call, said, "I'm driving to death. I am driving to death." He wanted to say, "I'm going to attend the funeral function."
Oh God.
Yes.
So like, that's why I said, this is a type of translation. The people, they use the mother tongue when they translate. That's the wrong thing, number one. And another thing, it's very difficult to find the equivalent word. That's why I said it's a difficult arena. So what about your comments about this? Thank you very much. It's not only questions, it's an observation also. Thank you.
Most welcome. Thank you for your illumination and also for your comment. I believe that the same thing happens across languages. I'll tell you something funny here. In Arabic culture, if you say that I smoke, you have to say that I drink cigarette. So cigarette becomes something drinkable.
Yeah.
If you tell somebody in India, I believe that it is I eat tobacco, right? If you,
yes.
I smoke, you have to say I eat tobacco.
Yeah.
If you look at it here from different cultural perspectives, the results sometimes will be funny, but this is the nature of languages, and this is the nature of difference of human beings. Okay.
Absolutely. But
yes.
Anyway, they are communicating.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Salman. Tawheed.
Tawheeda.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Abdullah. It was a nice presentation. I didn't have a question, but the term that attracted me is pollination. The word that you have used is pollination. Before I heard it only in botany, where we find plants doing the pollination. So this is a new term and particularly it will be cross-pollination, between different cultures.
Yes, definitely. Yes, it can be like that. It's just, it's the first attempt, by the way.
Really. Yeah, it was a wonderful, the title means it is attractive. What first impression is the last impression. So it attracted me, the pollination. And what I can say, literature transcends barriers, binds people. So whether it is Arabic, whether it is English or any vernacular language, it transcends all barriers. And like you told, in Arabic and English, when we mix, there is a tone of vernacular language. So same is the case with India. When we translate from English to Hindi or Hindi to English, we call it Hinglish. English.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yes.
combination of English. It is not true English, true Hindi. It is the combination of both.
Something
English
between.
in a tone of, yeah, really, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Abdullah is really
Good
credited.
evening.
Yes, Iman.
Dr. Iman, the colleague of
Iman.
Dr. Abdullah from the University of Shakra. So
Welcome.
I would like to thank, shukran, thank you. I would like to thank Dr. Abdulaziz for this interesting presentation. And I have a comment and a question. We say that the translator always betray the original text. But I think with literary translation, the translator has the freedom to play with words, to change even the meaning of the text. The context is very different. Like what
Dr. Iman. Dr. Ayman.
في الثقافة العربية يثلج صدري في اللغة الإنجليزية it warms my heart يعني في تغيير جذري. هل تظن, do you think that the translator is no longer betraying the original with the by the means of pollination?
Well, thank you for being here and thank you for your interesting question. The question of faithfulness to the text is actually nowadays is an outdated concept, but let me dwell on it, let me reflect on it a little bit, okay? Because there is some kind of feminist attack. Yes, I say it. Okay, if you are acquainted with the translation theory, that you find that they attacked it. They looked at translation as a female who is, not faithful. But let's look at the upper level. The upper level says that the translator has to deliver the meaning to a different audience. And in this way, he or she has to deliver the meaning. The prime target is no longer the source text audience. The prime target is the target language audience. So I have to bring to them what is good to their sensibilities. The question of faithfulness to the source text is irrelevant here, unless you want to foreignize the text and you want to stress the fact that the author of the original text wanted to say so. Specific point. On another level, faithfulness is, as I said, is a kind of outdated point. I missed the other point. It was on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, the question of faithfulness is an outdated point. If I will meet you when I remember the other idea, I'll let you know about it. But anyway, now the question is, okay, got it. If you distort a literary text, if you try to take it too much to the sensibilities of the target language audience, you would turn the text into adaptation. It would become no more translation. For example, if you take Shakespeare, for example, one play of Shakespeare, and try to translate it for children. In this case, it would not be a translation. It would be rather a kind of adaptation, because you will have to change the words, you have to change the meter, you will have to change a lot of things. You will have to take too much liberty. And in this way, it becomes adaptation. Roman Jakobson, one of the most well-known theorists of translation, one of the earliest actually, and one of the I can say most famous, not only in translation, in linguistics in general. He was a Russian formalist. He said that everything said in one language can be translated into another language, but poetry by nature is
untranslatable. Yes.
Yes, that's what he said exactly. Yes. Because you cannot just recreate a poem in one language into another. And if you try to add your own flavor as a poet translator, then you are creating something more than the original. And in this sense, of course, it is derivative. to the original, but it's not the original. It's something with an added touch. For example, if you, it's like, you know, a cup of tea with added, you know, comments and added more spices to it. It's not tea anymore. It's more than tea.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you for your question. It's good.
Welcome.
Any other question? Okay, Dr. Abdullah, I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah, for being here today. And I would like to thank our audience for their contribution, Dr. Silam or Dr. Ayman. Yes, sorry. I apologize for the pronunciation of the wrong pronunciation.
It's okay.
Of the name, and Dr. Ayman as well. And we are very happy to have you this night with us. And we would like to encourage you to let's say, to indulge in these occasions in order to contribute to our community of researchers and let's say academic scholars. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. Thank you very much, Dr. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. See you again.
Thanks a lot.
استاذنك السلام عليكم.